Hi everyone, we're back on the podcast today, and I've got Scott McDowell with us, who is coming on board to tutor maths with us in the next and after the summer holidays. Scott's going to be tutoring some KSC maths classes and also A-level maths, and we'll be doing another podcast with Scott and Judy to discuss A-level maths later. But today, Scott is going to share a little bit about the classes, but also talk about his faith and how we see God in mathematics. Scott, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Yeah,
Can you please
thank you,
tell us
Emma.
a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So originally I'm from Northern Ireland, and yeah, I moved over to England for university, and then I studied there, and then I went on to become a teacher. In my kind of third year of university, I became a Christian. So I wasn't a Christian obviously up to that point, and at that point in my life, I'd planned to join the Royal Marines, but God had different plans, which is, in hindsight, is a really good thing. And he decided that I was going to be a teacher, so I did my teacher training, and then I've worked in two schools, one in the centre of Leicester, and then one in Loughborough, which is near where I live now. And I've taught Key Stage 3 maths, GCSE maths, and at the minute I'm teaching some A-level maths as well. Yeah,
Wonderful. We both love maths. And through maths, we can see the hallmarks of the Creator. How has your faith shaped how you see mathematics?
yeah. So I suppose growing up in school, I had a very secular education, and God was not portrayed as relevant to mathematics. But I suppose as a Christian, God has to be relevant to mathematics because He's the one who created it. So by default, He must be relevant. And so I would then say, as a Christian, we should expect God's fingerprints in mathematics when we study it. And I think it's interesting to see that there are definitely some of those.
Mhm.
So I've been reading a few books recently, which I find very interesting on Christianity and mathematics. And one of the things that's come up in the reading is that mathematics has reflections of God's character.
Mhm.
So, for example, if we take, a very basic truth like 2 plus 2 is 4, that truth is always true. It's been true 2000 years ago. It will always be true. So, in a sense, it's an eternal truth,
Mhm.
and it reflects God's character in that way. And there are different ways that mathematics can reflect God's character.
I remember I grew up in going to church, but I really was serious with my faith when I was about 16. And I remember that whole idea of people saying, oh, they look at a sunset and they say, oh, that's so beautiful, there must be a God. I
Yeah,
never actually got that. I love nature. I love the beauty of nature and everything. More so
yeah,
now, but as a teenager, I didn't understand that. I'm like, I love
yeah.
sunsets, but I couldn't see that connection. What I did see though, I remember being in sixth year, so that's the final year in Scotland in maths, doing 6 year studies maths, which is like it's no longer a thing now, but it's like A2 level mathematics.
Yeah.
And I was sitting in a class and we're learning, it was pure maths, and we're learning these mathematical proofs. And I
Hmm.
was blown away by the elegance of it and how it worked and the complexity. And I started thinking, wow, there is a God because of these
Yeah.
mathematical formula and the proofs that we were doing. It really
Hmm.
just, I
Yeah.
could look at maths and see that hallmark of a
Yeah.
creator.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose they're laws, aren't they, in a sense?
Mhm.
And laws infer a lawgiver.
Yes.
Uh, and also the world, they're not just conceptual. They actually do describe the world, and we
Mhm.
can use them. So in a way, it's God's kindness to allow us to use mathematics to help us to build, and so yeah, all of it can link back to God.
Yeah, I think as well the fact that you then take those laws and they describe these very abstract looking numbers and squiggles and the algebra, the calculus, they work beautifully with numbers,
Hmm.
but then those numbers translate to real life things like
Yeah.
the motion of planets
Hmm.
or how a wave function works within physics or you can then take that and apply it to chemistry and then ultimately into biological systems and you've got mathematicians now working they work in biology describing um, biological systems that seem at face value seem chaotic and
Yeah.
random, but they have deep mathematics underpinning them. And this interconnectedness, thinking that doesn't happen accidentally.
No,
That
definitely not.
is that's design, that's
Yeah.
intentionality, that's engineering at work from an engineering
Yeah.
mind. It all that continues to just blow my
Yeah.
mind. I think I can't see how anyone can not look who understands mathematics
Hmm.
can't see the the creativity and the
Yeah.
intentionality behind how mathematics works.
Yeah. I think the more we learn about all sorts of different fields, the more complicated we see the world really is.
Yeah.
And I suppose at the minute we know something of some sciences, but actually there's probably so much more complexity to it,
Mhm.
which just again points to God as the creator,
Yeah.
which
And
is
I
great.
think we see that. I was watching a thing about microbiology, so cellular biology. So they were looking at the cell, and at school we learn about biology. We learn about all the different organelles. We look at the like the mitochondria and the
Hmm.
endoplasmic reticulum and all these wonderful little organelles and how they work. But now that we've got um, penetrating electron microscopes and we can see what's happening, you're like, these are little machines. These
Yeah,
are like
yeah.
nano machines and they're working. You've got these proteins that are working like a machine, all in relation to one another. And it's like a little city of deep complexity
Yeah.
working together to make this cell work. And these cells are then working together with the neighboring cell and the neighboring cell in their different functions to make to make that tissue work or that organism work. And that's like, that's insanely
Yeah.
complex.
Yeah, yeah. And I
And
suppose
there's
we could put a
nobody,
probability on it of, happening by chance and so on. And yeah,
yeah,
it wouldn't happen by chance, really.
yes. So yeah, I could talk about that all day. That was it just amazes me. We can see it at the tiny level and we can see it at the big astronomical level. Again, when you
Yeah.
look at the probability that these things happen by chance is like it's
Hmm.
like there's the probability is just so astronomically huge.
Yeah.
Um, so at Arise, we talk about Christ-centered education. For
Hmm.
many subjects, it is clear how to bring Christ into the center of the subject, whether that is by the choice of literature we read in English and how we approach the study of it, or how we handle big questions in science like evolution versus creationism. In maths, we can say maths is maths. Algebra works if you're an atheist, a Hindu, or a Christian. How does God come into maths education?
Yeah. I think we've talked about quite a few of them. I would just again say that specifically the Trinitarian, view of God, Christian view of God. We have Jesus as the Word, and in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. And then we learn in other parts of the Bible that God upholds the world by His Word.
Mhm,
And so, in Christian theology, God is not a God who just, kick-started the world and then had nothing to do with it, but He actually actively upholds the world. And mathematical truths are part of that. 2 plus 2 is 4, 2 apples and 2 apples are 4 apples. That's true because God, He upholds that truth.
mhm.
And that's what I would say
Yeah,
through His word. And of
yeah.
course, the word is Christ.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I think as well it's that idea of that that upholding of the world with God's word, and also the idea that you mentioned how this is true and it's always true. Like two and two is four is true,
Yeah.
and therefore God's word is always true. That idea there are truths that are always true, and in the world that we have today, in the culture that we have today, where truth is becoming this is my truth and that's
Yeah.
your truth. And
Yeah.
no, there's absolute truth. Maths
Yeah.
is absolutely true. You cannot if maths is if two and two is four is true for me, but not for you, that whole thing
Hmm.
just falls apart. It's
Yeah.
absurd.
Yeah, I often like to ask the person who says, that's true for me, but maybe not true for you. But you just ask them, is that true?
Yes,
Because it's a circular argument.
it absolutely is. It is, and it's absurd. But that's what I love. So it reflects the character of God.
Yeah.
Matthew, Mummy's in a class. I don't know what that is. I don't think it is paint. Go and take it outside. As I say, interruptions.
Yeah.
I don't know what he's found. Um, okay, pause and then we'll
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So Scott, you're going to be tutoring the KS3, well, some of the KS3 maths classes this year.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about those classes?
Yeah, so I'll be doing year one and year three. And just to give you some times when they are on the Key Stage 3 year one would be on Thursdays from 12:30 to 2. And then the Key Stage 3 year three is on Mondays from 11 to 12. So we cover really just the Key Stage 3 curriculum, which is split into in the UK five main areas. So you got number, so things like adding your fractions, your decimals. You've got algebra, so things like solving equations. Then you have ratio and proportion, so maybe sharing things in a ratio and so on. And then we have geometry and measure. So that's things like your circles,
Mhm.
measuring your units, centimeters to meters. And then we do probability and statistics, which would be your averages, your mean, median, mode, and so on. So that's
Brilliant.
kind of the content that we'll be looking at.
Yeah. And I think one of the things we found that for those kind of lower secondary years, building those foundational pieces is really key to then success for later on. It's a time to review and to fill in any gaps from previously.
Yeah.
And I think for home educators, I know a lot of home educating families, we can often use a lot of math, American curriculum in
Mm.
our maths. So in our primary school years, there's amazing programs in the US
Hmm.
that are really rigorous. They give a really good solid maths foundation. But for UK home educators who are perhaps going to go and do GCSEs, there's that point in that lower secondary age where it is of benefit to kind of switch into that slipstream of the UK curriculum. So the
Hmm.
KS3 maths is an excellent opportunity to transition from maybe a US way of doing it, or maybe if you've just struggled to find the right maths curriculum, you've changed curriculums a bit and there might be gaps and you're concerned and you're looking ahead to building to starting GCSE maths, that this is a time to maybe slip in there and plug those gaps to get used to that different style of teaching because US mathematics is often very you'll do a year of I know in primary
Yeah.
school you'll do a year of addition.
Sorry, algebra one, algebra two, pre-calculus, whereas the UK curriculum is quite wide. Like those five units that we study, number, algebra, ratio, proportion, and then statistics and probability, that covers all of kind of your basic maths. So it's quite a wide, yeah,
Yes.
foundation,
And I
if you
think
will.
it's much more I think if I remember we did do a year of US maths with my daughter when she was in primary school and we did a year of division.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't think we did the full year. It was just
Yeah. Yeah,
so
it's nice that you
boring.
can mix things up. If you're
Yes.
seeing different topics, it can be more interesting than just learning division for a year.
Yeah, and it's like if you're like losing the will to continue because you're doing something that everyone hates. You know, with
Yeah.
the UK stuff that it's just a couple of weeks, and then we're going to switch to geometry, and that's going to be much nicer for everybody, and we'll all be
Mm.
happier. I love that about the way that we do that kind of more a bit of everything and a cyclical nature of the teaching of maths in UK. Um, and so that, I think it's protect. So this is this idea of can I get into slipstream? I would say from KS3 is that a good time to do it, but particularly if you have a teenager you're thinking, are they ready for IGCSE maths? And you're not sure, you're kind of coming up to it. I would say the KS3 third year, the year of for Scottish students, it's S2. For England, it is year 9.
Yeah.
Yes, I always have to double check because translating between the countries.
Yeah,
So
no,
I would say
yeah,
that is a really good point. If you've been doing some other curriculum with your kids up until that point, that's a really good point. Jump in, if you haven't already done so, to the UK national curriculum so that they're in a really good place for IGCSE. Get those gaps filled, see where they're at, how well they're going to do with, especially those things like algebra. It's such a new concept and it can be such a hard one for so many kids to suddenly have letters thrown into maths. It can just like,
Mm.
what?
Yeah, yeah. It becomes very abstract algebra, doesn't it? Or, you
Yeah.
can imagine one and one, but X and X is a bit more abstract.
I
Yeah,
found that with students that they can be really good at mental arithmetic. They're good math students, but once you throw in that make it that a bit more abstract,
yeah,
it
yeah.
disorientates them.
Yeah, I think a part of that is just age. You wouldn't expect really young children to be able to, understand metaphors and think conceptually.
Mhm.
They need that solid representation. And I think that's same in the transition from number to algebra. Some children are just a little bit too young
Yeah.
and they're not ready for algebra just yet, but they would be if you give them a few years.
Yes. So that's a really good point. So that, just to mention this as well, right, we've put together a maths readiness table of things to aware of just to help you with transitioning. We've done it for lower secondary, for upper secondary, so those kind of transition points for going into KS3 and from KS3 to KS4, which is the IGCSE level. So we've put that document together, which I will also link in to the show into the show notes to the description below, as well as a link to the KS3 classes. If anyone has any questions and you're not sure, please email us at arise@arisehomeeducation.com and we'll get back to you about just your questions about maths. Thank you so much, Scott. It's been a
No
pleasure to
problem. My
have you
pleasure.
on. Bye bye.
See ya.